Mom's words cut through the silence like a blade. "You don't deserve a penny." Ethan's hands, resting on the edge of the mahogany desk, trembled slightly. He had imagined this moment countless times, but nothing could prepare him for the finality in Margaret's voice, the chill that made the room feel smaller, tighter. Lena's smug smile added salt to the wound, her heels clicking against the polished floor like the ticking of a merciless clock. Outside, rain battered the windows, a gray curtain against the world, echoing the storm inside Ethan's chest. He felt betrayed, invisible, a son dismissed as inconsequential. Yet beneath the shock, a spark of disbelief flared when his eyes landed on the edge of the desk drawer. Slightly ajar, a hint of paper peeking out. That small, overlooked envelope, sealed with his father's initials, promised a truth Margaret had to erase. And in that moment, Ethan realized that the story his mother had told the world might be wrong, and that the bank statement inside could speak louder than her words ever could. Ethan's fingers hesitated on the envelope, a simple fold of paper that suddenly felt heavier than any weight he'd carried in years. Inside, the handwriting was unmistakable. His father's careful script. As he unfolded the letter, the words seemed to pulse with life, recounting private memories, lessons, and a secret inheritance hidden from everyone else. Each sentence carved a path through his anger and despair, replacing doubt with a fierce, quiet hope. Lena's laughter drifted from the hallway, sharp and cruel, but Ethan didn't hear it. He focused on the letter, feeling for the first time that perhaps his father had never doubted him, that perhaps Margaret's words were a lie, a wall meant to keep him small. Now he knew. This was his proof, and the first step toward reclaiming what was his by right. From the doorway, Lena watched Ethan, the shadows of the study accentuating the sharp lines of her face. Her instincts screamed that he had found something he shouldn't have. The calculated patience she had always used to manipulate family dynamics was now challenged by the raw, undeniable truth shining in her brother's eyes. She stepped closer, heels barely making a sound on the floor, ready to snatch the advantage back, to twist this discovery into a weapon for herself. But even she couldn't fully mask the flicker of unease that crossed her expression, because deep down, she knew the truth would outlast any of her schemes. Margaret's face tightened when she noticed Ethan with the letter. Her lips pressed thin, a practiced mask of control, but the faintest quiver betrayed her, a crack in the armor she had worn for decades. "What is that you're holding?" she demanded, her voice brittle yet sharp, a mother suddenly unsure of her own dominion. Ethan met her gaze without flinching, the courage rising from the certainty that his father had chosen him, leaving behind a silent endorsement that no amount of scorn could erase. Margaret turned away, whispering to herself, perhaps to convince herself that the letter didn't matter, that she still held the final word. As Ethan scanned the letter, a series of numbers and instructions caught his eye. A bank account, untouched, in his father's name, with a balance that made his chest tighten. This was no accident, no oversight. This was his father's final gift, a lifeline meant only for him. He could feel the injustice of Margaret's words fade as clarity settled in. What he had been told about worth and inheritance was a lie. This quiet, secret fortune wasn't about greed. It was about trust, validation, and the subtle defiance of a father who had seen his son's heart when the world hadn't. Margaret's hand froze over the phone, a sinking dread clawing at her chest. She had heard of the account, of course, but she had always assumed it would remain hidden, a secret that would never surface. Yet here was Ethan, her worthless son, carefully combing through spreadsheets and login details as if he belonged there. The betrayal she felt was deeper than she anticipated, her control slipping like sand through fingers. Her voice shook slightly when she called the bank, feigning concern, but the clerk's calm words only confirmed her worst fear. Yes, there has been activity. The account is in Mr. Ward's name, and the beneficiary listed is Ethan Ward. Margaret's world tilted, the perfect illusion of authority cracking, and she realized that her disdain might have been her undoing. Lena's phone buzzed with a message from Margaret. "Ethan has found something. Fix it." Her lips curved in a calculating smile as she surveyed her luxury apartment. Polished floors, reflecting the city lights outside. She loved power, and this was her playground. Every opportunity to manipulate, intercept, or twist the truth was a chance to ensure Ethan got nothing. But beneath her composure, a faint unease rippled. Ethan had always surprised her. This time, however, she was determined not to underestimate him. Her plan was meticulous. Charm, deception, and a perfectly timed confrontation that would reclaim her advantage. Ethan packed his few belongings into a worn duffel, the motel room dimly lit by a flickering neon sign outside. He couldn't trust Margaret or Lena, not yet. Each movement was careful, deliberate. He had to protect the secret account until he understood its full power. He felt a bitter mix of liberation and fear. The family he loved had turned into strangers overnight. The letter, the bank account, and the memories of his father were his only allies now. As rain pelted the roof, he traced the letter with his fingers one last time, letting the words soak into him like armor, preparing for the storm ahead. Margaret sat rigid in her armchair as the postman placed a crisp envelope on her doorstep. Her name in neat print, but she recognized the logo instantly. The bank. With shaking hands, she slit the envelope open and unfolded the statement. Her eyes widened in disbelief as the numbers leapt off the page. Ethan was the rightful owner. She reread the entry, each line a cruel revelation that she had been wrong all along. The very son she had dismissed, accused, and humiliated was not only innocent but chosen. A bitter cocktail of guilt, fear, and disbelief settled in her chest as she realized her authority was gone. Her control shattered by the one she had tried to diminish. Lena parked outside the motel, her fingers tightening around the steering wheel. She had tracked Ethan through the clues he left behind, an opportunity to intercept the inheritance before he could act. But as she watched him through the rain-streaked windshield, she felt a pang she didn't expect. Unease. Ethan wasn't helpless. He moved with caution, intelligence, and purpose. She realized this wouldn't be a simple confrontation. Her carefully built plans were fragile, and for the first time, she wasn't sure who truly held the advantage. The storm outside mirrored the chaos within her, the tension between ambition and blood binding her to a reckoning she had yet to face. Ethan's face burned as whispers followed him down the street, neighbors' eyes sharp with judgment. His father's home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a courtroom, and Margaret's words echoed in every glance, "You don't deserve a penny." Lena's laughter, carried from an open window, cut deeper than any insult. Every step he took was heavy with shame, yet beneath it all, a quiet ember of determination glowed. He had lost their approval, their trust, even their home. But he hadn't lost the truth. The letter and the secret account were his alone, and they were proof that worth wasn't measured by applause or inheritance. It was measured by integrity, courage, and the quiet resilience of standing tall when the world tried to break you. Ethan sat on the edge of the narrow motel bed, head in his hands, the flickering neon sign outside painting stripes of blue and red across the walls. He thought of his father, of letters and hidden accounts, of moments that had shaped him into someone strong despite being dismissed. Loneliness pressed down like a heavy curtain, yet he felt clarity. He had to rise, not just for money, but for dignity, for the quiet justice of reclaiming his father's legacy. He unfolded the letter again, letting the words guide him, each line a blueprint for courage in a world that had tried to convince him he was nothing. Margaret paced her marble-floored hallway, the bank statement clenched in her hands. Each step felt like thunder, echoing the realization that she had misjudged her son, allowed pride to blind her to truth. Every memory of dismissal, every harsh word pressed on her chest. Guilt, sharp and relentless, gnawed at her, and for the first time, she understood that control and fear could never replace trust. She sank into an armchair, head bowed, eyes tracing the numbers on the page over and over, hoping the ink might be wrong. But knowing deep down that it was. Lena stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror, her red blazer perfectly sharp but her hands trembling. The illusion of control was slipping, the meticulously plotted schemes unraveling, as she imagined Ethan claiming what she believed was hers by right. The city lights outside seemed to mock her, 1,000 tiny witnesses to her vulnerability. For the first time, she questioned her tactics, wondering if her ambition had blinded her to a truth she could no longer manipulate. Ethan was capable, clever, and ready to reclaim his father's legacy. Panic, sharp and biting, settled like ice in her chest. Ethan stared at the city's skyline from the motel window, the rain painting streaks across the glass like rivers of memory. The humiliation, the betrayal, the loss of home. They had forged him into someone resolute. His father's letter lay beside him, the hidden account ready to assert his rightful claim. This was more than money. It was validation, truth, and justice. He tightened his fists, feeling a surge of clarity. No storm, no betrayal, no deception could break him now. Tonight he would rise. Not just for inheritance, but for the quiet victory of honor restored, of dignity reclaimed, and of a son proving that worth cannot be dictated by others. Margaret's voice trembled, a rare crack in her armor, as she stepped into Lena's sleek apartment. "This has gone too far, Lena. He is our son. He deserves the truth." Lena's eyes narrowed, lips tightening into a practiced smile. But the slightest flicker of panic betrayed her. Margaret slammed the bank statement on the polished table. The numbers glared like accusations. Lena's hands hovered above it, unsure how to respond. For the first time, Margaret was the one in control, not by pride or force, but by the undeniable power of truth. The quiet, simmering tension between mother and daughter filled the room like a storm ready to break, each realizing the other could no longer manipulate the narrative alone. Lena's fingers clenched, heart pounding, as the implications settled in. Every scheme, every manipulation, every lie she had relied on was crumbling before her. Ethan, her quiet, underestimated brother, had become the arbiter of truth. And Margaret's voice, once so unwavering, was finally aligned against her. She realized her pride, her ambition, had blinded her to a force she could not control. The quiet courage of a son wronged but not defeated. Lena's mind raced for a plan, for leverage, but each thought collided with the undeniable reality. Ethan now held all the cards, and time was no longer on her side. Ethan set up his small recorder, his fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. He played the voicemail left by his father days before his death, capturing each word of love, trust, and quiet pride. Lena had dismissed him. Margaret had doubted him. But here was evidence, unchangeable, irrefutable. His father's voice filled the room, calm yet firm, confirming that Ethan had always been the rightful heir. As he listened, a mixture of grief, relief, and vindication washed over him. This was no longer about money. It was about reclaiming his father's legacy and exposing the truth to the world. Margaret arranged a tense family gathering in the old study, the very room where Ethan had been disinherited. Lena, polished and tense, arrived expecting control. Ethan entered quietly, letter and recorder in hand, calm and resolute. The room seemed to hold its breath, the rain outside tapping a steady rhythm on the windows. Margaret's eyes met Ethan's, an unspoken apology passing between them. Lena's smirk wavered as the stakes became clear. The gathering was no longer about appearances or power. It was about truth, and Ethan was prepared to reveal it all. Ethan pressed play, the room filled with his father's calm, loving voice, echoing against the walls. Every word, a testament to trust, loyalty, and the quiet pride his father had in him. Lena's face fell, the polished armor of confidence cracking with every syllable. Margaret's tears glistened as guilt and regret washed over her, her hands shaking over the edge of the desk. The truth could not be denied, twisted, or silenced. It was living in the room, undeniable and powerful. Ethan, the son deemed unworthy, stood in quiet triumph, not out of spite, but out of the enduring validation of being seen for who he truly was. Ethan stepped into the small community hall, his father's letter and recorder in hand, the rain outside forming a soft percussion on the roof. Neighbors, friends, and distant relatives filled the seats, murmuring with curiosity. He didn't raise his voice, didn't demand attention. He simply placed the recorder on the podium and let the voicemail speak. The room fell silent as his father's calm, unwavering words echoed through the speakers, affirming Ethan's worth, his integrity, and the inheritance meant for him alone. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the audience. For once, Ethan didn't feel like the disinherited son. He felt like the rightful bearer of truth. Lena's face drained of color as the voicemail continued to play. Her carefully maintained confidence crumbled under the weight of undeniable truth. Every calculated step, every whispered manipulation had been undone by the voice of a man she could no longer manipulate. She sank into a chair, hands trembling, eyes wide as the community absorbed the proof of Ethan's legitimacy. Her ambition, her pride, even her sense of superiority were powerless against the quiet force of honesty. Margaret sank into the front row, hands clutching her purse, face streaked with tears. Her lips moved silently, forming apologies she had once refused to voice aloud. Every word of her husband's recording reminded her of the son she had dismissed, the love she had ignored. She felt the full weight of her mistakes, and though the room's eyes were on Ethan, she knew her reckoning was internal, a confrontation with her own pride and denial. Redemption felt distant, but acknowledgement of truth at last gave her the first breath of relief she had known in years. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs to quiet applause. Ethan watched the crowd absorbing their acknowledgement and respect. For the first time, he felt the weight of validation not from inheritance, but from those who saw the truth. His father's legacy wasn't just the bank account. It was the courage to stand for honesty, even when the world denied. The community, once spectators of family tension, now recognized Ethan's quiet strength, and the hall hummed with the resonance of justice restored. Lena rose quietly, her pride shattered, and slipped out the hall. Her footsteps echoed faintly against the polished floors, a rhythm of retreat and defeat. Ethan's eyes followed her for a moment, but he didn't gloat. Victory wasn't about her humiliation. It was about reclaiming what was right, restoring dignity, and allowing truth to breathe. Outside, rain washed over the city, mirroring the cleansing of deceit and the quiet power of honor restored. Margaret stood at Ethan's modest apartment door, the envelope of bank statements still clutched in her hands, trembling as if the papers carried the weight of her years of denial. "Ethan, I was wrong," she whispered, voice brittle, eyes glistening with unshed tears. The words felt foreign, heavy, but necessary. Ethan opened the door slowly, his expression calm, not angry, just measured and composed. He didn't rush to embrace her. He didn't demand absolution. Instead, he let silence speak, the quiet acknowledgement of her mistakes, giving her the first lesson in humility she had ever learned. Lena, however, remained unyielding. In the corner of a coffee shop away from prying eyes, she stared at her reflection in the window, fists clenched, lips tight. Pride still tethered her to denial, even in the face of undeniable evidence. "He doesn't deserve to win," she muttered, though the words sounded hollow even to herself. The world had sided with Ethan, but her heart refused to surrender. There was anger, but also a seed of respect buried beneath the layers of ambition, though she would never admit it. Ethan walked through his neighborhood, modest duffel over his shoulder, waves and greetings following him like a gentle tide. The whispers of shame had been replaced by smiles, respect, and acknowledgement. People who had doubted him now saw his quiet courage, the strength in a son who had been wronged, yet chose integrity over revenge. Every nod, Every handshake was a quiet affirmation. Worth is measured not by approval or money, but by character, by truth, and by the resilience to stand unbowed. Margaret sat quietly in her home, the bank statement and letter laid neatly on the coffee table. Her hands hovered over them, tracing edges without touching, as if afraid the proof of her mistakes might vanish. Guilt lingered, but so did hope. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine redemption, even if partial. The lesson was bitter but invaluable. Love and trust cannot be replaced by pride or fear. Her heart ached with the realization of what she had almost lost, and yet the first sparks of reconciliation kindled within her chest. Ethan stood by his apartment window, rain streaking the glass, gazing at the city he now faced with quiet determination. Victory was hollow, not sweet, not triumphant, but profound in its subtlety. He had reclaimed his father's trust, his inheritance, and his dignity, yet the scars of betrayal remained. He breathed in the cold, wet air, feeling strength in survival, hope in truth, and peace in knowing that he had faced the storm without compromising his integrity. Lena and Margaret were still entangled in their own struggles, but Ethan's path was clear. Live honestly, rise quietly, and carry forward the legacy his father had always believed he deserved. Margaret stood on Ethan's doorstep, the envelope of faded bank statements trembling in her hands. The city around her buzzed with life, indifferent to the storm of regret in her heart. She hesitated, then knocked gently. When Ethan opened the door, calm and composed, she felt the weight of decades pressing down. Words unsaid, apologies delayed, love denied. "Ethan, I finally understand," she whispered, voice fragile, heavy with the truth she had once resisted. He didn't answer immediately, simply studied her with quiet patience, offering a small nod that spoke volumes. The silence between them held decades of hurt and healing, of loss and redemption. They sat across from each other at Ethan's small kitchen table, the envelope between them like a bridge across years of silence. Margaret spoke haltingly, recounting her pride, her mistakes, her regrets. Ethan listened, not with anger, but with the quiet grace of someone who had finally been seen. Every word she spoke was a weight lifted, yet also a reminder of the pain she had caused. He offered only small gestures. A nod, a brief touch on her hand, the steady calm of presence, letting her realize that redemption was possible, even if imperfect. Margaret traced the edge of the envelope, her fingers lingering over the faded paper, thinking of all the moments she had missed, all the harsh words that could never be taken back. Ethan's quiet strength filled the room like a balm, proof that worth isn't measured in punishment or pride, but in courage, perseverance, and truth. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to breathe, to acknowledge that she had been wrong and that he had always deserved better. The room held a fragile peace, stitched together by honesty, love, and the unspoken understanding that time could heal, even if only in small increments. Ethan rose and offered Margaret a cup of tea. She accepted it with a tentative smile, the small gesture carrying the weight of years of reconciliation. No words were needed. The silence spoke louder than any apology could. In that quiet exchange, Margaret understood the depth of his forgiveness, and Ethan recognized that peace, while imperfect, was possible. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind the soft clarity of understanding and the fragile, enduring bond of family, tested, strained, but not broken. Margaret stepped out into the soft morning light, her hands empty but her heart heavier with understanding. She paused at the door, glancing back at Ethan, who stood in the quiet apartment, the letter and bank statement now resting on the counter behind him. No words passed between them. None were needed. In that moment, she saw not the son she had doubted, but the man he had become, steadfast, dignified, and unbroken. She turned and walked away, leaving Ethan in the gentle glow of morning, carrying his father's legacy, his own resilience, and the quiet, unshakable truth of his work.